Hello and welcome to the May edition of State of the Project Meros. I am your host, Cryptosi, and I am joined, as usual, by the mercurial talent known as Kayaba. Kayaba, how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for asking. I
Okay,
actually find it humorous they use the term mercurial. There's actually a source control system called Mercurial from years ago. Like Git's replaced it, but I actually had a bug with it the other day. I was trying to use a tool and I gave it a Git repository and it tried to clone it using Mercurial because it supports both for some reason. It was the stupidest bug.
I feel like victory lap now. I feel like all the bricks have been laid. I feel like the castle's been made. I feel like the party's about to start. Someone's coming out with the cake. Um, Everybody's relaxed. The hard yards have been done. So let me do my regular introduction for those of you who have not been regular listeners. I don't know what you've been doing with your lives, but you can make up for it now. This is State of the Project. What we do every month is we discuss a project called Meros. Meros is built from the ground up by mostly by this gentleman sharing the screen with me or sharing the audio. And it is supposed to do what cryptocurrency was originally meant to do. It's supposed to be instant and pretty much feeless or actually feeless. And it's just very good. So without too much to do, let's get this victory lap started. And what better place than the newly created RPC, Kayaba? Is this RPC the crowning moment in your entire life?
I would definitely say no. I would say there's a lot more to Meros than just the RPC I'm more proud of. So we've discussed this before, but the RPC is how other programs will talk to Meros. It's how exchanges will talk to Meros. It's how services will talk to Meros. It's just how any other program will talk to Meros or the more technically minded users. And we actually did have an RPC, but there were a few issues with it. I had listed out a variety of RPC methods, like different things you could do. You could get a transaction, get a block, you could publish a transaction, so on and so on. And despite listing them out, I had implemented all the ones I just listed, but there were still a few others I hadn't implemented. So one of the things this new RPC did is it really just expanded it. It made sure the methods were consistent. It didn't say X does X, but then we have Y doing Z. No, it made sure they were all consistent. It made sure they were all accurately documented, and that the original list I had, that it was fully implemented. It also moved from, so we have a JSON RPC where that's actually a standard, and it just uses JSON to issue RPC commands. We were transmitting this directly over the network using TCP, which is how most internet traffic is routed, except if you visit a website, you actually use something called HTTP to actually access the website, which you can see in front of your URL, of course. And that just says, hey, I have some data, like, hey, I want to get this website. Here's the data I'm looking for. Give me it. And the website responds accordingly. It's a decent enough protocol. Instead of saying, hey, we have data, here's the info about it, before saying here's the data, which is how HTTP works. It says, the incoming message, it's 100 bytes of data, 100 things. We just said, nope, here's the data directly. And that works. You can do that with JSON. And I have to admit, I prefer doing it that way. But now we use the proper HTTP standard, which means that all existing HTTP clients will work with the RPC, which was massive for compatibility and just widespread support. But I do prefer the simpler protocol, especially because HTTP is a very large protocol and it's not fun to work with. So we got the new transmission protocol. We just made it so it's a lot easier to talk to. And then we added all the new methods and we actually revamped the wallet in the process. Previously, if you generated a wallet, it would say, okay, here's your address. But we actually use a UTXO system like Bitcoin, which means you don't have to have a single address. You can easily have multiple addresses, like every single transaction can use a different address. So one of the other things I did with the new RPC was I properly integrated the wallet code. It now generates addresses, it handles having multiple addresses correctly, and you can even have Meros be a watch wallet. You can have it watch incoming funds without actually having your private keys at this point. And that's something I'm very excited about.
Does this make exchange integration a lot more accessible, a lot easier to accomplish?
Well, because we changed the transmission protocol, as I said, it's now a lot easier to do so, because previously with the previous standard, it was very small and easy to implement, but you still generally had to implement it yourself. No one else was really doing this, which I'm not surprised about, but I'm kind of sort of surprised about. Like, I understood when I wrote it, it was going to be somewhat custom. It was sending JSON directly to other people, and it technically was possible and valid, but there's a reason people generally don't do it, which is for widespread compatibility with libraries. But I was surprised I couldn't find a single example of someone else doing it. That's not me saying it was a good idea. I think it was a good idea for other reasons. But no, there's a reason we moved off of it. So now that it's a lot easier to integrate, because now you just download a library. You don't have to write your own code for it. So that's one thing. Though it's going to be a lot easier for exchanges that care about security to integrate us, because they can track deposits without actually having said deposits on their computer at that time. They can receive it directly to a cold wallet and therefore not have to do further management of their hot wallets. Because instead of just outgoing funds, now you have incoming. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
So the watch wallet definitely helps there, and that will also help businesses, services, payment processors, and more. So no, this definitely really helps out with the ability to integrate Meros into any system.
A few months ago, this sort of functionality, was you planning to have it all at launch, or did you think you would launch without it and then possibly add these things after a few months?
So changing it on the level we did would be a breaking change in a lot of ways. Not only would it be a new transmission protocol, but I think some methods were removed. I'm not actually sure. We may have solely renamed and added new methods, like new commands and things you can do. But it would be such a breaking change. It would require a lot of services to rewrite a decent amount of their integrations.
Yeah.
Because now instead of having RPC command X, you have RPC command X, but it's handled as Y. And that's valid. That's the point of the redo. But it would have meant RPC, like exchanges and so on, would have had to really spend some time upgrading their implementation to the new standard. And that would have been detrimental to the ecosystem. So no, I did always consider it something that has to be done before launch, which is why I spent the amount of time I did on it before launch, because it definitely took way longer than I expected it to.
I didn't get a chance to read through the description of the commit. It seemed to be the longest description I think I've ever come across on a commit in my non-coding life. It's basically a book. I checked through the issues because I like to come at you with the issues. I find them to be the most interesting sticking points of your previous month's work. One thing I noticed was there were no critical issues added during the last month. I did ask you this last week, and touch wood, it does stay this way. Are you happy with this? And do you think it's probably because you've been working on the RPC? And do you think this may change when we run when you and the other developers run? No, actually, when we, because it'll be non-developers too, run the last testnet. Do you think we may find some more critical issues?
Well, the point of the testnet is to find critical issues, but I hope we wouldn't. I've always prided myself on having very extensive testing, and I do my best to write comprehensive and quality tests. So on that premise, I hope I'd find anything that would be critical, but our testnets in the past have found critical issues, generally with the amount of nodes we run. The first few networks, they actually died just because we didn't have efficient communication, and nodes would get either stuck talking to each other, or they would basically flood each other with data. There were a few issues going around on the early days. So I wouldn't be surprised if we found a critical issue, but I would extremely hope not, but that's also the point of it. So if we do, I would be happy we found it then and not later.
Yeah, of course.
But I do think the fact we haven't found any with this new commit, in the really long description is actually over 100 different commit messages squashed into a single message, by the way. So it's actually a list of messages.
Right.
But not only is it not really a critical part of the code, I did actually work on a lot of new tests as part of it, and those. It's interesting. If you're testing the RPC, generally you test the core protocol. You test it as a block, you test it as a transaction, so on, and you use the RPC to verify it. This is the other way around. You use the RPC to do something, and you use the protocol to verify it, which is actually a very interesting concept. But no, as part of that, I actually did test a lot of the internal handling because the RPC expects X data and Y data. And that X data and Y data is based on the correct handling by the protocol. So even though I didn't work with the core protocol that much, I did test the RPC and therefore the core protocol. And I did actually find some things of note and one or two issues, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
But yeah, we just are finding less and less critical issues because there's less and less in the code base, if any.
There was one issue which was actually opened and closed pretty swiftly. I personally feel like I have some kind of influence in this issue. The issue is issue number 298. For those of you that don't know, the links for all of these issues will be in the description, so you can go and check this one out. This one's a brilliant issue. This is a cracking issue. The issue simply states, and it was opened by another user whose name I've not actually got here, but it's opened by another user, and it's
Joe 23232.
That guy there, yeah, or maybe that lady. Is Meros a privacy respecting current cryptocurrency? And that's issue number 298. And I'd just like to say that this is a prime example of exactly why non-developers should use GitHub. So Kayaba,
I would actually disagree with that. As much as I appreciate his interest to learn about the project, GitHub isn't meant for a discussion forum, and I closed the issue almost immediately as I saw it, just because I did respond, and then I responded again saying closing this as it's not relevant, because he's not. If the question was implementing privacy into Meros, and it's like privacy should be in Meros, even if he didn't have a technical proposal for it, that would have been a valid issue in my opinion. But simply asking, it's just asking for. He simply asked, "Is Meros a privacy respecting cryptocurrency?" And the answer, that just does nothing to do with the code base. We're not discussing any issues with it. We're not discussing edits. And it's actually spawned from another issue. We have a miner, Meroxidizer. And he actually created an issue on the authors, because I didn't actually write Meroxidizer. A quality developer who's a friend of mine did. And he created the issue on that project. We have our own upload of it. We have our own mirror of it, and that actually is updated to the new RPC while the original authors isn't. Like, we are the maintainers of the project, don't get me wrong. And I have read through the code, of course. But he asked there, are you able to use the miner as a library, like where it could be compiled into something else, where we later learned he wanted to compile it into a GUI? Does it support Beam, Zcash, or Monero? How efficient is it to some other miner? And is there a mining fee? So he found Meroxidizer thinking it was a Monero miner, I guess, and thinking that it had a developer fee and that he wanted to build a GUI that can mine Monero and or other coins. So he was looking for something like that. And I commented, like, heads up, main repo is actually over here. This is not maintained. So on and so on. And then I'm like, Meros is an original currency. This won't work with any other currency. We have a unique mining algorithm. It's RandomX, which Monero uses. That part isn't special. But after we call RandomX, we do a BLS signature hash, which is meant for pool resistance. And after that BLS signature hash, we actually RandomX it again just to increase the proof of work a bit more. So no, this would not work with Monero if you tried to hook it up. It's not planned to support any other coins at this time, so on and so on. And he's like, got it. Is there any privacy respecting stuff in Meros? And as he asked that, he also created an issue on the Meros repository. And I don't mind answering these questions at all. I just think he should have gone to the Discord, or like he also opened this on some other miners. He didn't just do it on Meroxidizer. And in that case, I feel like he should have gone to their communities. I really don't think this should be in the issue tracker.
I feel like whilst he did put the question in the wrong place and possibly asked it in the wrong way around, I feel like it is a great question.
I do think how he asked it is fine. Yeah, I just think it's the wrong place for it.
Yeah, but this is the right place for it. So I'm going to ask you, Kayaba. We have discussed privacy before, and it has always been a kind of let's see how things play out type of response you've given me. So at this point, What are your thoughts for privacy with regards to Meros? Are there any things that you've really got in mind? And if you plan on implementing them, when do you think you'll implement them?
Cryptosi, I just want to tell you now, and I'm so sorry about this. Privacy will not help you hide the way you pronounce privacy as privacy. That's out there on the internet now. You're done, Cryptosi. It's too late. You can't go back on it.
Do you know, I sometimes call it privacy and I sometimes call it privacy, and I can't remember which one I used to use before I met Americans. So I can't even remember which one is correct. So it just depends.
Obviously, privacy is correct. But jokes aside,
Okay.
the privacy technology I've personally been most interested in is ring CTs, which is confidential transactions plus ring signatures, and it's what Monero uses. It's generally it's a lot cheaper than ZK Snarks in multiple ways. It doesn't have a trusted setup, and it does have some trade-offs. Ring signatures in their current form, or at least as Monero has them configured, they have you mix in with 11 other transactions, but it still means one out of the 11 is yours, and that can be broken with enough computing power. In fact, the early version of Monero, they used a much less secure algorithm, which has been broken. So you can see the funds flow through the first years of Monero. You can't see how much money flowed through, but you can see the senders and receivers. And of course, they're all single-use keys. You can't get much data out of it. I'm just noting from a technical perspective that this privacy can be broken, whereas Zcash actually offers some stronger privacy in that sense. But I appreciate the speed of it and definitely the lack of a trusted setup. It's also what I know more personally. I've read through some sections of Sapling, which is the Zcash's current ZK Snarks protocol. But it's really Monero that sticks with the level of cryptography I'm familiar with, one. And two, beyond that, they also, it's just something I've worked with before. I actually do have experience with it. My main concern with that doing privacy, beyond the speed concerns, is one, the development time. And that's the reason I just don't want it at launch. I really think it's important for Meros to establish itself, and I think adding another 2 to 3 months to the timeline at this point is just not going to be beneficial for anyone. But beyond that, the other thing I wanted to keep in mind is the Meros Development Fund. It has people voting with Meros amounts, which means the Meros amounts can't be private in order for them to be votable with. And that actually is a concern of its own. And there are ways around this. We could have you temporarily reveal your amount of funds. We could have we could use, so when you have a private amount, what's actually on chain is known as a commitment. And something you can do with commitments is with enough technology is you can actually add them together and compare them. So you can get like a ranking number 1, ranking number 2, ranking number 3, so on and so on. So there definitely are ways for the Meros Development Fund to have people vote with Meros and still have privacy to some degree, but it's a very complicated discussion. So while I do want privacy in Meros, and I definitely think it will be in Meros eventually, it's not going to be in there at launch.
This is going to be a bit of a blunt question, I guess, and a bit of a hypothetical. But if you had to choose between the Meros Development Fund and privacy, which would you choose?
I think privacy helps Meros more as a currency than the Meros Development Fund. And beyond that, I think Monero, which doesn't have a development fund or like a decentralized development fund, they do have the Monero CCS, which is a great community project. We've already had discussions about starting one up for Meros, or at least I'm not sure if we've had public discussions about it, but I've talked to someone who's interested in doing exactly that. So there have already been discussions about a Meros version of the Monero CCS, the community crowdfunding system. And I don't think the MDF is needed if we get the right community culture going. That said, it is still something I want, but the MDF will also be the last thing I integrate. One, because it was kind of tacked on. It was the first Meros improvement proposal. It's still not even in the official protocol docs yet, even though it was accepted. But it probably will be the last thing I do because it might take another month or two to implement. So I want to see what the timing is before we implement it, before we say this is worth the extra month or two to launch.
I want to ask you about what I believe is the only new issue to go on to the code base in the past month. and that's dependency versions aren't properly pinned. Number 297. Link will be in the description below. There is quite a good description to it, uh, actually, on the issue itself, which is kind of typical of you. But could you explain what this means, and essentially what does this particular bug, which isn't marked as critical, what does it mean for the end users or for people that are using Meros?
So I know the issue you're talking about. And first of all, one, I missed a word here. It says Nimble currently downloads 3.0. It's meant to say Nimble currently downloads Chronos 3.0. Chronos is a library we used, and they recently upgraded from a 2.0 release to a 3.0 release. And with that, that generally means there are major changes. You can't just download the latest version and move on. The problem is that, one, Nimble doesn't differentiate. They see 2.0, they say 3.0, they say 3.0 is a higher number. It must be good. I don't like that. No, it's really not optimal of Nimble. For some reason, Nimble is the package manager for the NIM programming language. For some reason, both NIM and Nimble have decided to disregard completely and utterly this thing called SEMVer, semantic versioning.
Okay.
And that basically says if you have a 1.0 release, you can't break anything until you hit a 2.0 release. If you have a print statement named print, you can't rename it to please print. You have to wait till 2.0. You have to keep compatibility. And NIM has decided to utterly forgo this, and it's actually one of my main criticisms of NIM currently as a language. Especially because I just have a lot of complaints with NIM's versioning. But Nimble also doesn't respect that. So that means when a package author makes a major edit like 3.0, which doesn't compile with our code base, Nimble's like, oh yeah, that probably works. And then there's a second issue, actually, where we can't download the 2.0 release anymore because Nimble is used to a tag system where releases are tagged. You have version 1.0, version 1.2, 1.3, whatever. Chronos as a library didn't tag any of their releases. They solely have the most recent release. And you can manually download a specific release, yet I haven't been able to do that from the automatic build file, which I should be able to do. I don't know why I haven't been able to. But for some reason, I haven't been able to. So it really... There are still things we can do. We can say the Nimble version must be this, and if not, error out of compilation. So that error is out earlier on, saying it can't get the proper library, instead of erroring midway through, saying, oh, random build error, your code is dumb. It would actually say, hey, this can't find the proper library, and therefore have a proper error. But it's something I'm still working through. But basically, when our libraries update, sometimes they make breaking changes, and NIM and our current project will try to download the most recent version most of the time.
Yeah.
And because of that, Meros is currently actually not compiling. I actually think that issue might want to be bumped up to critical now that I think about it.
Well, that was actually a part of my question, because if it's not compiling, then why isn't it marked as critical? I thought there might have been a reason why you specifically didn't mark it as critical.
I think someone informed me of it when they were trying to build Meros at like 11 p.m. Okay. So I think I created the issue and marked it as a bug and then kind of forgot about it because the next day I went back to the RPC. Okay. I have been working on that for a while.
Okay. So something like this, is it out of your hands, essentially, to be able to fix this? Do you have to hope that...
Sorry, I forgot. I just completely forgot to mute my phone. I'm so sorry about that.
That's fine, because I've completely forgot to mute mine, and I thought about it a few minutes into this podcast, and I hoped that no one will ring me. Luckily, it's 11:15 here, so chances are no one wants to call me at this hour. Famous last words.
Cryptosi, why are you up so late?
Turns out I have friends in weird parts of the world that are behind us in time.
America is pretty weird.
It is definitely.
Did I ever tell you we don't have healthcare?
You don't. The richest country. Anyway, let's not even get into that. So what I wanted to ask is, is this issue pretty much out of your hands? How much control do you have over how NIM do these types of things, and the I don't want to say incompetence. I think maybe I may be talking about
versioning incompetent.
Yeah.
You don't have to. I would.
Okay, good. I think you've got the status to say that. So yeah. So how will you go about making sure that Meros isn't too badly affected by the mistakes that you are
So
clearly making?
I find it humorous that you use the term status because Kronos is actually by Status, the Ethereum project.
Ah,
So the
yes, you
library
have
in
said.
question. Yeah.
Excuse the pun.
So worst case scenario, we actually just fork their libraries. And we fork all the dependencies we use. So we use Kronos and we just fork it and we just manually move it back to the older version. And then as Meros is ready to update, we move it up the version. So that's the worst case scenario. It's just we maintain copies of it ourselves. These are all open source libraries. We can legally do that without issue, and it wouldn't be frowned upon by the open source community or anything. Because we're also not really stealing traffic. We're just storing an older version publicly. Like, really, there wouldn't be an issue with that. So that's the worst case scenario. But really, besides that, one of the things we should do is, actually upgrade to the most recent versions with the most recent bug fixes and so on. But even if we upgrade to the most recent versions, it may still make sense, at least for some libraries, to maintain our own copy. Just because if we maintain our own copy, then we can ensure that even that it just wouldn't break in the future like this again.
Yeah.
And we would just have to regularly update that and take it on as a maintenance task. So there are things we can do about it, but I can't. I actually did ask Status if they'd be willing to tag their releases so it would work nicer with Nimble. And they said that if they tag any release, Nimble will solely use the most recent tag. So that means on every single commit, every single new change, every single edit, they would have to tag a new release. And they said that they were not willing to do that just because of how their ecosystem is. And I completely respect that. I'm not going to be, oh, no, my needs for an ecosystem are more important than yours, even though you're the author. No, I'm not going to go to them who are contributing this actually really quality open source library and just be an ass to them.
Okay,
So,
fair enough.
Yeah.
You're a better man than me. This is more of a comment than a question, but I can ask your opinion on it. I noticed that this particular month, State of the Project has now become a written piece. So one of the community members has decided to actually not quite subtitle what we've done, or transcode, is that the word? Transcribe. But there is now a written version of this actual podcast. So the topics that we discuss here can be found in a written version. Do you think this can be a longer term replacement for the older Medium posts that you used to do, which were bi-weekly, but they've been missing for the last few months as development work has really intensified?
They were tri-weekly for the longest time. When we had them regularly going, they were tri-weekly most of the time. And it may even be over a year now that we've ended those. I actually am curious real quick to the point I want to pull this up if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind.
Let's see. Meroscrypto.medium.
I don't think
Here we go.
I don't think it's been a year, but time has flown, to be fair.
Last one, March 26, 2020.
Wow. 1 year exactly.
It's been over a year since we dropped them.
Yeah, 1 year exactly. So that's nice.
So 1 year, 1 month in 3 days, but
well, no, but the most recent one was, well, I'd say at least a free.
Oh yeah, the most recent written update was for April. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's say.
So this written alternative is sort of taking the place of those written updates. Mainly, we just want to. The reason I dropped those is because, one, they were very time-consuming to write, and two, we had a very quality podcast going on. So I really just wanted to focus on that. But this written form is meant to enable people who don't have the time to sit through a podcast to still be able to read it. And it's a very quality piece done by Strontium, and I, of course, helped them out with it. And it's really just made to increase accessibility of the content we're already generating instead of necessarily spending time generating new content. So it's really just about making sure information is accessible. Awesome.
Yeah, shout out to Strontium. Great work on that written piece. The next question I have, I believe, is another. I believe it's another. Oh, I've definitely got this wrong. Okay, I feel it's another issue, but I thought there was only one. So beaten transactions, beaten transaction inputs, which may be unspent if the beaten spender loses, will no longer appear in any get UTXOs call. Uh, I'm going to say this is issue number 300, sorry. Now,
Maybe off by one or two there.
yeah. It's accuracy. No one cares. What does this mean for the end users? And it doesn't sound like too much of a big issue to me. But is this something that will be simple to fix?
So this is actually a really fascinating one. With the new wallet management code, one of the things we need to do is track UTXOs. UTXO standing for unspent transaction outputs. So Cryptosi, if I send you money, you know how I have an unspent transaction output. It's an output from me to you. It's part of transaction, and you have yet to spend it. When you spend it, it's used. It can't be spent again. So the idea here is that you can spend that in a transaction. And then let's say you're Cryptosi. I'm sorry to say it. You're evil, Cryptosi. You are a malicious actor trying to steal from the network. I can't believe you, Cryptosi. How could you? Even in my theoreticals, you're a bad person.
You got me. You got me.
So let's say you try to double spend. You create two different transactions that spend the same UTXO, so on and so on. There is this edge case. You can have one transaction have multiple inputs. So because of that, you can have one transaction, spend the money I sent you, and spend $5,000 from someone else. Let's say your own funds. $5,000 from your own funds, and the $5 I sent you to thank you for buying me a soda the other day. Side note, why did you pay $5 for a soda, Cryptosi? Are the prices over there in Europe really that bad?
Yes, yeah. I was out and there was nowhere else to get drinks from, and I've got a 6-year-old, and he was shouting at me. So yeah, $5. Take my money.
So you create one transaction for both of them, $5,000 and $5.
Yeah.
But then you're like, wait, no, I want this $5,000. I'm going to be evil. So as you decide to be evil, you only create a transaction for this $5,000. Only one of them will win. Meros, the network, will look at them, they will vote, and only one transaction will win. So let's say it's your $5,000 transaction that wins.
Mm-hmm.
So now there technically is a transaction that exists that spends the $5 I sent you. It does technically exist. That said, as far as the network is concerned, it was beaten. It was no longer considered a valid transaction, and we're not actually doing anything based off of it. So because of that, the transaction output created in response is no longer spent. Even though it does technically have a spender, it is still considered unspent because the spender didn't win the battle. Right. It's been struck from the record effectively.
Yeah.
And this issue is just saying that Meros as a protocol handles that without issue. If Meros detects this happening, you can still spend that transaction without issue. Mm-hmm. That said, if you ask Meros, hey, what outputs do I have unspent? Meros will not tell you that output. So even though Meros doesn't report it, the core protocol still considers the core protocol is fine here. But Meros won't report that. And that's the bug here. It's that Meros is like, oh, wait, this has a spender. This must be spent. When in reality, there's technically a way, yeah, it's a thing.
So essentially, that $5 that I didn't spend for the soda, I then wouldn't be able to see in my wallet after that.
It wouldn't show up, but if you did manage to create a transaction on the protocol, even despite that, it would still be spendable. So the core protocol here is fine, but it wouldn't show up in your wallet because the wallet would be like, oh no, you spent that.
Right. Okay.
So,
okay. Do you know what? When I read this, I thought it was something more like it wouldn't matter. It was just like the failed transactions get shown as well. So I was like, well, who cares? Who cares about the losers? But this actually does matter because then anytime you try to spend and you don't get to spend it, when you go to look in your wallet, you won't be able to see it. So that's.
But of course, it's also very low priority because you have to create a double spend in a very specific way to trigger this.
And effectively, then it would serve you right because you do play silly games, you get silly prizes.
So right? It is something I'm going to fix because it is a technical bug in Meros. And there are ways that you can not be malicious and create a double spend. You can have two wallets open by accident, or you can have one on your phone, or you could create a double spend to try to cancel a transaction. You could go to pay $5 for soda, accidentally pay 50, and try to create a double spend as fast as possible to get your $50 back. Like, I'm just saying there are some technical reasons that a double spend can happen that aren't malicious or are kind of malicious, but are for the greater good, which is not losing $45. Because Cryptosi, I can accept it if you go to an event and you pay $5 for a soda. Event price is a whack.
Yeah.
But paying $50, Cryptosi? Paying $50?
That's how I turn into evil Cryptosi and start with a double spending. Okay, let's move on. So, I wanted to ask you about GUI development, because all of this talk about RPC is great for you and all the other guys who know what they're doing. But for people like me, what we need is GUI. What we need is buttons with little words on them, say spend, receive, flashing lights, and all of that sort of good stuff. How is the GUI development for Meros looking?
So I actually commissioned a GUI years ago, and it's been on GitHub since I commissioned it. And it's rough around the edges. It was meant to be a draft. It was not actually meant to be the full GUI. And I'm trying to pull it up right now, actually, just to see exactly when I published it. I published it August 2020. And no, that's not even when I published it. That's just when I made the most recent edit. I published it April 2020. So about a year ago, like there's plus minus 3 weeks. I never actually integrated that into the code base. And one of the reasons for that was the RPC. The GUI directly talks over the RPC.
Right.
So from a technical perspective, anything you can do from the GUI, you can do from the RPC. There's no like secret internals going on here. And that was really important to me, not only to simplify development, yet also to make sure the RPC was competent. If you can have a GUI that delivers a full experience, transaction history, balance checking, creating transactions, viewing the network, so on, that means that any service should be able to integrate with your node properly if they can do the exact same things. So that was really why we did it, not only to reduce the complexity of the code base. We don't want to have the RPC doing all these tasks and then the GUI also doing all these tasks. Yet we also wanted to make sure that the RPC was filled out, competent, and so on. So I had known about the RPC redo, or at least that the RPC needed work on it for a while, and that was one of the reasons I didn't expand it. The other reason is that I'm not someone who uses a GUI. It doesn't help my day-to-day development. I'm writing tests over here. I'm just interfacing with the protocol. The tests don't even spawn up the GUI. Yeah. And because of that, it just hasn't been a priority for me. But now that the new RPC is here, we actually had someone speak up in the Discord recently offering to help out with the GUI side of things. So I wanted to reach out to him and see if he would be willing to look at integrating it.
Brilliant, because you have to think about the little guys, people like me who can't, or we can, but we just don't like to type in commands.
No,
it's not.
No, I think that needing the GUI is completely fair. Not everyone devotes their life to computers. And I'm not going to shame anyone over that, except for you personally. I'll shame you personally over a Cryptosi, but I won't shame the general public. And it's something we're working on, and it's definitely something I've kept in mind.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy that now that there is a RPC, I kind of feel like the building blocks or the foundations, let's say, for a good GUI, or maybe multiple GUIs, are now there, so people can just come along.
You could definitely have a remote node do it, or a remote service. You can have a separate wallet running and then just connect to a Meros node provided. Like, you could theoretically run a watch wallet off the RPC.
Yeah.
Or not a watch wallet, sorry. You definitely can do. I meant you can have a remote wallet. Like, you can have people download an app and then just connect to a Meros server offering up the RPC.
Yeah.
So effectively a light wallet, except it's not actually doing the proper method of doing a light wallet, where you still sync the very minimal set of the blockchain, which is a few megabytes generally. I think in Bitcoin it might be a gigabyte or two by now, but yeah.
Maybe. Okay. This question's a bit...
Okay, Cryptosi, we have to do the math now.
Go ahead.
It's going to take me 5 seconds to find out.
Okay.
Maybe a bit more. If you go to blockchain.com, you have to click another button to access the Explorer nowadays. I remember 2016 when it was one click. You just went to the site and it gave you the Bitcoin block info.
That was the good old days when crypto was crypto.
Okay. the minimal set of the Bitcoin blockchain, which is what you need for what's called an SPV light wallet, is
I'm going to guess
55 megabytes.
Yes,
Oh, sorry.
there you go. I was going to guess it was less than a gigabyte, and I would have been right.
Yes, I was way off. 55 megabytes.
You were.
And then Meros has 2 to 3 times as large minimal sets of data. 2 to 3 times. So if we just take the average of that by going 2.5, that ends up at 136 megabytes.
Yeah. That's not.
Which is after the same amount of years of operation as Bitcoin.
Yeah, which is not bad at all.
No, that's definitely manageable. So
okay.
That would be my preference for a light wallet, but on a very more simpler and get it up and running point of view, no, the RPC definitely exposes all the relevant data.
So this RPC is as much of a big deal as we've made it to be, I guess. It really is a big deal. Thorchain.
Yeah, it's something I'm very excited about.
Thorchain was what I wanted to ask you about next. Now, I don't know how aware or not you are of Thorchain. I'm going to assume that you're not, but
I'm aware when I'm being shilled to.
I'm not shilling, but I guess
okay.
I guess for full disclosure, I should have to say other DEXs are available, and I do own some Rune, I think it's called. Anyway, Thorchain is allegedly the first DEX that there is, and everyone says they're first. If you're second or third, you say you're first. I think it's BlockDX. They probably weren't even first. Anyway, will Meros be able to work with Thorchain? Is it something that you've looked at?
I have never looked into Thorchain, and it sounds like they're a DEX. And I'm surprised you're not. I'm surprised you're shilling Thorchain here instead of something like BlockDX, which we've talked about in the past.
Yeah. Well, we have talked about BlockDX, but we did know that. Well, we did get to the bottom of what the problem was, the reason why it would be difficult to integrate Meros into BlockDX at the time. I'm not sure if ASMR changes that.
BlockDX
totally.
is atomic swap based, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
And we approved with ASMR. We did a proof of concept for atomic swaps on Meros via work actually researched by the Monero community. The Monero community funded a research into atomic swaps, which was done by an author known as Hash. And he successfully published an atomic swap protocol. And we did the first implementation of it. It was originally for Bitcoin and Meros, and then Bitcoin and Nano, and then finally Bitcoin and Monero, like 1 or 2 days after Nano. So no, we actually also did the first Monero atomic swaps. And I'm actually working with their team now. Hash has a few other associates who wanted to build a full implementation. Like we did a proof of concept, but they wanted to do a full industry-ready implementation. And I'm actually currently working with them on that in my spare time.
Yeah.
So we can definitely work on an atomic swap-based DEX. The question is whether or not they support this atomic swap protocol, because it's not the classic atomic swap protocol you would see with like Bitcoin and Litecoin. It's a different one. So they do have to still code and support. But if they code and support for Monero, it shouldn't be infeasible to also add Meros. Okay. As for EC, or for Thorchain specifically, I did actually pull them up. And they use multisigs, which are definitely not my preference for how to handle cross-chain exchanges and assets. That said, their cited paper is specifically multi-signature algorithms with ECDSA. ECDSA is a specific signature scheme that was used in Bitcoin, but it's not something Meros uses. Meros uses a different one called EDDSA. So instead of the C, there's a D. And as far as I know, the tech isn't different enough where it's not impossible to go from one to the other. But Thorchain would have to support EDDSA, and I'm not sure they do at this time.
Okay. I didn't know that Thorchain was built around multisig. That's
It's technically not multisig. It's something called threshold signatures. So Cryptosi, let's say there's a third person, and we'll call him Bob.
Yep.
So the idea with threshold signatures is that 2 out of the 3 of us must agree to do something. If Bob and I agree to move funds and Cryptosi, you're offline or you're being an ass, you're like, no, I don't want to buy sodas with you guys. I want to go buy rum. I don't know what you drink, Cryptosi. I think you would be the type of person who wouldn't mind a rum on a Friday night.
Yeah, I like rum. I do like rum.
Okay.
I don't know how you got
Bob
that,
and I
but
could...
I like rum a lot. I don't know how you got
Do we have to have a talk after this?
No, we can have a rum. Save the
but Bob and I can go like, okay, it's 2 out of 3. We have a threshold. We have agreement. You know, super majority over here, Cryptosi, and we can go buy sodas. Or if I'm like, you know what, Cryptosi, sure, we can try a rum this once. Then Bob's like, no, I want sodas, and Bob's being a prick about it because, of course, I'm never the prick. I am always a good person. Then you and I can say, okay, Bob's not in. We'll use our own private keys. 2 out of 3, we can create a threshold signature. So it's technically not a multi-signature, but a threshold signature, because the idea is that you only need X out of Y people to create the signature.
Okay.
So you need to cross a threshold of people to approve the action. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. When final testnet?
Oh, this question again.
This question again. Do you know, I have to ask you, because otherwise people will get together and they'll get on their Reddits, their little subreddits, and they'll start saying, oh, Cryptosi's going easy on him. He never answers the hard questions. Where? So...
Well, I still get asked this question every single day. Not every single day. There was like 4 days straight a while ago that I was asked it every single day, I think. There may have been 1 or 2 off days, but I was asked it straight a lot.
I would say it's probably 70% of days someone's going to ask you when mainnet or when...
No, it's died down. It's died down. I've been happy about that. There are a few people making some good jokes, though.
Yeah, well, people are probably watching the podcast. So what's the answer? When is the final?
The answer is always going to be when it's ready. It's taken a lot longer than I thought and hoped and would have liked it to. But the answer is always...
Well, now that the RPC is done, essentially, you're ready to go into the final testnet. What else remains?
So I have a list of lint tasks in front of me. Lint just meaning cleanup.
Okay. So
there's like this Chronos thing, which is that I'm downloading 3.0 when we need the 2.x release. So I have to fix that just so Meros will compile in the first place.
Yep.
There's just one cryptography. Okay, so EDDSA and ECDSA are signature schemes. They say if you have an elliptic curve, you can do this to create a signature. But there's also, beyond signature schemes, there's the underlying elliptic curves, where these curves are how you define, like, oh, here's the addition. It's a whole thing. But basically, you have SECP 256K1, which was used by Bitcoin and Ethereum. And Ethereum used it just to mirror Bitcoin for wider compatibility. And I get why they did it, but I still dislike it. Actually, Ethereum does a trick with it that is amazing. And because Ethereum uses that trick, I think it's valid. Like with the idea of Bitcoin compatibility and that trick, I think it's valid. But there's this other curve, which is widely considered as better, and it's ED25519, and it's what Meros uses. That said, there is a third curve, Cryptosi. There is a third curve. It's called Ristretto, and it's actually a layer on top of ED25519, but it solves some theoretical problems with it, to say the least. Like, Monero actually had, it didn't have a double spend. It had enough tuple spend, where you could spend a single output 8 different times.
Oh, nice.
Nice. But so generally when you have a double spend, you think, oh, I can just infinitely spend it over and over again, or I can spend it twice. No, this was just 8 times, and there would not be an issue.
Turn my 5 grand into 40 grand. No problem.
Oh, and then do it again. Exponential growth.
Yeah,
come on,
baby.
Cryptosi, game up.
Yeah, baby.
But as part of this premise, right, that's because ED25519, it has this, to keep it simple, it has this variable in it, and that variable is 8, which means if you have a private key X, you can just create 8 different forms of everything.
Okay.
It's bullshit, to be honest. It's such utter trash. Generally you work around that. It generally is not an issue. And the reason it was an issue for Monero is just because of how they handle privacy.
Well, how does this get us to our final testnet?
Well, my point is that there's a better way to do things, and Meros is moving to that better way. But because of that, that's one of my cleanup tasks. It's improve the core internals a bit. Then I have to fix some bugs. Like, that's just going to be my next week. It's really just going to be cleaning up the internals. That said, there is still 2 different protocol changes after that I have to do. I have to implement the epochs redo. Yes, another redo, or another new thing. Oh my gosh, I just should call everything new. New cryptography, new epochs, new RPC, new RPC, new RPC.
New. So, what sort of time scale are we looking at?
If you let me finish.
Sorry.
So I'd imagine the cleanup test to take a week or so, and then the cryptography change just another few days. So I would expect that to be within 2 weeks. My main concern is, one, the epochs redo, because that is quite complex. And that could take 2 weeks at best, 6 weeks at worst. I'm really not... after the RPC, I'm hesitant to give any short timelines.
Yeah.
It's a pain. It's a pain, Cryptosi.
Yeah.
It's important. And then checkpoints. Actually, checkpoints should be one of the easier things to do. I'd hope to have that done in 2 weeks or so.
Okay.
And that is the medium estimate. So all that in mind, we're looking at 2.5 months. Okay. And then we would be ready for the testnet. But it really depends on, one, I still have some tests to write. There are always more tests. And on that premise of having more tests to write, that's going to add some time. And then I need to get the GUI integrated. Like, there's just always things.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm considering moving the Meros Development Fund out of mainnet, which wouldn't be optimal, but it would give us better time to resolve that and privacy and consider the 2 together.
Yeah.
So...
Okay.
There's a lot of considerations going on there.
Okay, so I've run out of questions now. You've been a gracious guest, as usual. Is there anything you wanted to say before we wrapped up? We've literally hit the 60-minute mark on, well, almost on the nose. Anything you wanted to discuss before we go?
I think given how much time we talk before calls, it's going to be a bit less than 60 minutes. But no, I'm really happy the RPC is done. I know there's more work in front of me, and I'll do my best to do it quickly. I mean, the optimistic timeline I gave, I think, was 5 weeks, not 10 weeks, which would definitely be a lot nicer. But really, it's just about hammering down and getting things done. And I wish I could be a bit more happy about how I say that, but it pains me too. But thanks for being an amazing host, and I always appreciate doing this with you, Cryptosi.
Oh no, awesome! This is like the highlight of my my TV life, basically. This is the highlight of my video life. This is great. So thank you very much for giving up your time again, for answering my questions, for your transparency, for your hard work. For your honesty, and hopefully we shall be back next month with the June update. For all the people that have made it this far, congratulations. This is where you give yourself a pat on the back, do a victory lap, anything you like. Please like, subscribe, and share. Also, I'm going to attempt to put a timeline in this episode, so hopefully there'll be another written version of this if you do share the video version. Also, if you do keep an eye out, or if you do spot the written version, try to share that as well. The more people that find out about this genuine project, it's not a DeFi get rich quick APR 59,000% 2 nodes.
Wait, it isn't?
No, it's not.
Oh, what have I been doing this entire time?
No, it's not.
I wanted to get rich quick.
No, it's not. This is it's an actual crypto project. So make sure you support the actual crypto movement and share, like, and subscribe and all that other stuff that I call good stuff. Kayaba, it's been absolutely amazing speaking to you again this month, and hopefully we shall record again next month. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cryptosi.